speaking of NBA free agency, the one and only Scoop B, Brandon Robinson, now joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. My friend Brandon, how are you doing on 4th of July?
Hey, man, happy 4th. Relaxing. Actually watching marathons on television right now. Not having a care in the world.
So what is your alcoholic beverage of choice for 4th of July? We'll ask you as well.
You can never go wrong with Bacardi rum, brother.
See, now we were talking about earlier, there's people who are the clear rum, and there's the people who are the color rum. So you're going Bacardi rum.
I don't discriminate as long as it's Bacardi. You can't go wrong.
I like that. I like the way you think.
One of my favorite rappers is Big Pun. And in his song 100%, I'll give you the abbreviated version, but he said, I don't discriminate. I regulate every shade. And it relates talking about women, but as far as in the case of rum, I don't discriminate against brown rum. Or I don't discriminate.
Hey, it works for both.
There you go. There you go.
Speaking of understanding, so the news, whether it's really news or not, right now is that Kawhi Leonard is not going to make a decision on 4th of July. And my co-host today, Hunter, brought up an interesting point, Brandon, which is he said, because Kawhi is so different than everybody else, because he's such a robot, that he thinks there's a possibility that Kawhi actually is observing the tampering rules and that he legitimately just didn't do anything until starting at 6 p.m. on June 30th. Is that possibly what the situation is? That Kawhi legitimately just sitting back and waiting until 6 p.m. and then he started his free agency?
It could be, but here's the other thing you have to keep into or take into account. His Uncle Dennis, comes from the corporate world. If his Uncle Dennis lives in South Orange, New Jersey, in parts of my childhood, I lived in West Orange, New Jersey, and I know we have some mutual folks. And what I can tell you based off of kind of the information that I have gotten from people who know his Uncle Dennis Robertson is, he's a very smart individual. I mean, his uncle was the guy who advised him on what to do in the situation with the San Antonio Spurs. And when you look at the situation with just being you say robot, I think it's being more so just being mechanical. We live in a day and age where people want instant news. So, yesterday on Twitter, people were trolling me because I didn't give them up-to-the-date answers about what was going on with Kawhi Leonard. And the minute Jalen Rose said something, people went with that. I think people are kind of like digital crackheads. You want instant information, and when it's not being given to you, you figure that's what it is. He's met with the Los Angeles Clippers, he's met with the Los Angeles Lakers, and he's met with the Toronto Raptors. Wouldn't it make sense to kind of take a holiday to sit back? In business, they do that. You take a holiday to sit back and kind of know where you're going, and you gather your thoughts, and you make a clear and concise decision. We live in a fast food microwave society, and things take time.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you. Look, the word Insta is short for instant. People want everything right here, right now. And I call it all the time. It's a microwave society. Everyone wants their mac and cheese in 1 minute or less, or they don't want it at all. And you're right. People need their Kawhi fix. And anytime anybody says anything, like it's quote unquote news today that Kawhi is not making his decision today. And I think that realistically, if Kawhi is everything that we believe he is, which is not like other NBA players, it only makes sense, Brandon, that he wants to make the best decision and not the immediate decision.
Well, if I can add, Kawhi is different from a lot of players in a lot of interesting or different reasons. I was on you guys' show last week. Aiden is off. But what I'll say is, I mentioned and wrote about it and tweeted it last week or the week before that Jimmy Butler was having a meeting with the Miami Heat. And so a lot of people took that as he was going to Miami, and everybody on the Philadelphia side were just up in arms. He's leaving. Now, ultimately it did happen that way. He is a member of the Miami Heat now in a sign and trade deal, which was a 3-team deal, as I, suggested. But when you're wrong, people get mad. And I think, Kawhi is in a situation where he was the top player this year, and he deserves the right to have everybody waiting. I mean, what makes you special? His ability to shut up has made him special. Jimmy wants to be that guy. Kawhi, or rather Kyrie and Kevin Durant, they want to be that guy. LeBron wants to be that guy. Kawhi is wired differently, and I think, there's room for everybody to be their unique self. That's what we want. Everybody wants someone to be unique, but then when they're not unique, you get mad.
So true. And also the other thing with Kawhi is, before we go on to the other NBA stuff, I think the other thing for Kawhi is whatever decision he makes, he's making it for his reasons. And that's the thing I appreciate. You and I talked last year about LeBron, how you, me, and only a handful of people were screaming, look, he's going to L.A. People were doing what they were doing. People, whether they're fans, certain members of the media, whoever it is, they place their sensibilities on the athlete instead of saying, well, what does the athlete want? And whether it's LeBron last year or Kawhi this year, instead of people saying, what would the athlete want to do, people are saying, well, if I was them, this is what I would do. And that's where the difference is between being objective and subjective.
Yeah, but people can be wrong too. I was wrong in September at first, and I ended up correcting it on, where Kevin Durant would ultimately go. Los Angeles Lakers was what I was hearing. An injury is some other things.
Let me jump in real quick. I don't think you were wrong. I would say that it's an ever-evolving situation because the player in September may think one way, but then things can change as the year progresses. Do people really think that Kawhi wanted to leave San Antonio all along? No, I think over time he said the situation changed, and so he changed what he wanted to do.
I would agree. And I also will add that he is the first Spur to really buck that system. Greg Popovich is more like a college coach in a system like a college coach in the NBA. Kawhi, literally, I don't think people appreciate what he's done in the last year. Homeboy literally was traded from San Antonio to Toronto and won a championship. He has the choice to either defend the crown or go somewhere else. That's like, and I've said it on many shows, that's like having the baddest chick in your college or the baddest chick in high school, and you take her to the prom, and you have the choice between her or Naomi Campbell standing on your front door.
He is Brandon Robinson, Scoop B, joining me here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig along with Hunter Brody, filling in for Mike Gill on the Sports Bash. Follow Brandon on Twitter at Scoop B on Twitter. Let's step away from the Kawhi stuff because, let's be realistic, there are other things that have happened. And one of those things that have happened has to do with our backyard here on 97.3 ESPN in Philadelphia. It looks like the offseason's pretty much set. They got the backup point guard. They brought in Al Horford, Josh Richardson in the sign-in trade with Jimmy Butler. It really feels like that, they didn't bring back Butler, but in many ways, they did run it back, Brandon. They brought back Tobias. They brought back a lot of these guys. And while Al Horford brings a totally new dynamic, there is a feeling that the Sixers haven't taken a step back, that they're pretty much either the same or better. What is your perspective? Are they the same as last year, or do you feel like they're a little better or a little worse?
I think that they salvaged something. Obviously, you lose Jimmy Butler. You add Al Horford. You lose Boban, but you still maintain Tobias Harris. And I'll tell you what, scared money don't make no money, as Elton Brand notoriously said. Elton Brand did his thing, and what I'll add is this. He's the hardest man in Philadelphia to keep up with. I reached out to him last week, and he sent me a text this morning. And I'll tell you I'll give you the abbreviated version of the text, but basically said, sorry I missed you. As you saw, things were getting kind of hectic. And Elton did that pretty well. I think that Elton really had a lot to prove. He laid low, as I told you last week, and as he told me, and he continued to just stay focused and doing what he needs to do. And I think that he had a reputation, and the Sixers had a reputation to compete with, and rightly so. I mean, you lost J.J. Redick, man. That was the one thing that I was hoping they would be able to maintain. I was with Adrian Wojnarowski recently, and he said literally this was before free agency The three hardest things that the Sixers are going to have to do is find a way to maintain Jimmy Butler, J.J. Redick, and Tobias Harris. And Tobias really wanted to be there. Everybody that I spoke to shared Tobias really, really wants to be a 76er. And, the way I was hearing was unless Tobias ended up, or rather if the Sixers didn't want to play ball and they kind of didn't open up their purse and, offer what he was due, he would go elsewhere, and Tobias stayed. And, you kind of know who are your guys. Jimmy Butler to Miami made sense, realistically, because Miami is making a turn. Miami is, post Dwayne Wade, and, they're looking to add DeMarcus Cousins and some other pieces as well. So they had to ship, Hassan Whiteside to the Portland Trail Blazers. But the Sixers, to me, are a team that has some ammunition and an ever-evolving NBA Eastern Conference. I mean, Milwaukee, I think, is going to be better despite losing Malcolm Brogdon, because I think that, I think that Giannis Antetokounmpo has a sense of who he is, post winning an MVP and more. So, I really like Philadelphia. I like Al Horford in Philadelphia, and it's been reported that that deal was agreed to or decided 2 weeks ago. People that I've spoken to tied to the Boston Celtics just told me how horrific that locker room was last year. And so Horford comes into a situation where he can be a mentor to Joel Embiid, a guy who really wants it. And I just really think they need some level of veteran leadership and a voice and a mental of morale in that locker room. And Brett Brown is going to have that in Al Horford.
I'm glad you mentioned about Joel Embiid because you said he wants the mentorship. And I think that's something that we overlook sometimes is that we want the younger athlete to be mentored, but the athlete has to want to get better. They have to want to be mentored. And I think that you look at a guy like Al Horford. Brett Brown called Jimmy Butler the adult in the room. Well, I think the one thing we know about Al Horford, he is the ultimate adult in the room. I mean, this dude won back-to-back national championships. This is a guy who's been Mr. Consistent, making the playoffs every year. The guy's game, he's evolved as a player and as a human being. And I think bringing that ultimate adult into this locker room only benefits the Sixers. It may not benefit them always in the stats. Like the stats may not show it, but I don't think you can spend enough for what Al Horford, his experience and his wisdom brings to the Sixers.
Yeah, I think in a day and age where everybody pays attention to LeBron and everybody else.
State Farm commercials.
But this is what I'll add. Al Horford, aside from winning 2 national championships in college, has had, I think his playoff experience is very underrated. I mean, a couple games this season, he went toe-to-toe with the NBA's reigning MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And not for nothing, I remember I was I went to Eastern University, which is on the main line. Mm-hmm. And during that time, I was in college. I would watch the playoffs and would see Al Horford's game while he was in Atlanta. Remember that team with Mike Bibby and Joe Johnson and more? When Joe Johnson was in Brooklyn with the Nets, I covered the Nets, and Joe Johnson would always speak reverently to me about that time with the Hawks, playing alongside Bibby and Al Horford. And, I just think now people are starting to realize the level of competency that Horford has, and I think his legend is growing. I think and I also think that with him playing with the Boston Celtics, he's kind of tied into how the younger players are, and he'll be able to adapt to a Sixers team. Let's not get it twisted. Jimmy Butler coming to Philadelphia was a great move at the time that they got him. But really and truly, it came down to Houston as well as Miami when they were looking to shop him. Minnesota was looking to shop him. Houston didn't necessarily have the assets that Philadelphia was looking for. And so, I think for Elton Brand to make the moves that he did and to bring Al Horford in, I think it's a team built in his image. And Philadelphia has something to prove because let's not get it twisted. Brett Brown is on the hot seat. I don't care what anybody says. I believe that if they don't get things right, things could change. But I also think that being on the hot seat is not a bad thing because you've added some things that are familiar. Philadelphia brought Udoka as a high-ranking assistant with Greg Popovich in San Antonio. He moves on to the city of brotherly love under Brett Brown. And if I'm not mistaken, Udoka won a championship with Brett Brown during their San Antonio days in 2015, when Kawhi Leonard was in San Antonio with all those guys. I think that when you look at the Sixers, I like the competitive edge that they have. I also expect Tobias Harris to really play within position. And I also think that Tobias Harris and Al Horford are going to push each other. When I look at some comments that Tobias Harris made before he ultimately signed with the 76ers, he said on SiriusXM radio he's looking to be with a team that makes it to the playoffs and makes a push. And if you look at what that means, the only two teams that are consistent, young, and can win like that moving forward to next year are the 76ers and the Utah Jazz. Tobias did have some interest in the Utah Jazz, but he stayed in Philadelphia. And I think that there's pressure, but I also think pressure makes diamonds.
Brandon, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time here on 4th of July on 97.3 ESPN. Give me a team this offseason that you say they made the biggest or the best or the most appropriate upgrade.
The Utah Jazz. I have two teams, actually, the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trail Blazers. I'm very high on the Utah Jazz. I think that the Utah Jazz with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert can make wonders happen because they added Mike Conley and they added Jeff Green, a guy that signed all these one-year deals but has never been involved in any controversy, has always come to play. And I just think that group is going to be a special group because they remind me so much of the Miami Heat early in Dwayne Wade's career, particularly with Donovan Mitchell. I think Mitchell and Dwayne Wade's career are going to mirror each other 15 years from now.
All right, follow him at Scoop B on Twitter. Brandon Robinson, appreciate him joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, at Scoop B on Twitter. Brandon, my friend, appreciate you jumping on, and happy 4th of July again.
You the man. Enjoy your drink after the show, of course.
Oh, I certainly will.